Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video. And just a couple days ago, we were talking about the new awesome Tavern Brawl that's live right now, where you can have all sorts of different World Championship decks from 2014, I believe, to 2024, and you can have the unnerfed Undertaker that used to drop on turn 1 and be an unkillable snowball machine. Or you face off against a 2024 deck that has a Dreadhound Handler and answers it on curve while gaining tempo with no problem at all. And it made me think back to, you know, some of the older expansions in Hearthstone history and just go over one in particular that might be the most impactful and the most kind of trend-setting, game-changing that we've ever seen since its launch. And it's not a set that's held in like high regard. It's not even really talked about as one of the most impactful out there. But to me, yeah, it might be the most impactful expansion ever, and Dreadhound Handler is a big part of that, even though the card came out many years later. So we're going to talk about exactly what I'm talking about. And if you enjoy the content on the channel, feel like I've earned your subscription, please hit that sub button down below. Give the video a like, as it helps the channel out a lot. And sometimes I just like to yap about Hearthstone, and I want to set the scene. I want to set the scene where we're just coming off the year of the mammoth, arguably the greatest year in Hearthstone history, where we had Journey to Ungoro, the Knights of the Frozen Throne, and Kobolds and Catacombs, 3 back-to-back banger after banger after banger expansions. Phenomenal. Some of my most played archetypes are from this time. You have the Death Knights, legendary weapons, the first iterations of quests, and you even had still currently in standard like Whispers of the Old Gods and Karazhan and Mean Streets. And some people love Mean Streets, their Jades and the Pirates and all that. But to me, Whispers, Ungoro, Frozen Throne, and Catacombs were absolutely goated. But how do you follow up a year like that, or 2 years like that at Hearthstone? Well, in 2018, everything changed, and I'm not being hyperbolic with this. The Witchwood might be the most impactful set ever, and especially in terms of where the game moved from there in more ways than one. It's not even that Ben Brode left shortly after the expansion launched, but it's the mechanics that the Witchwood introduced that are still extremely prevalent in the game today. And I'm not even talking about a card like Shudderwalk, which is still a prominent, well, not as prominent, but still a force in Wild to this day. I'm not talking about that. I'm not even talking about a card that I rated horribly, saying it was a 0-star card.
This is like the worst card in the entire set. Baku the Moon Eater, 0-star card. It's terrible. I don't see it at all.
In Baku the Moon Eater, or of course its counterpart in Gen Greymane, these altering hero power cards that had to be Hall of Famed a year early because they were deemed so problematic. And that is historic in itself. We've never seen that before or since with cards where they've been rotated early. But there actually is something pretty relevant to these cards, is the start of game keyword actually introduced with this set. Was Prince Malchezaar, but I don't think any card had really altered like your hero power or something that prominent, rather than like, you know, Malchezaar shuffled some cards into your deck, right? This altered your hero power, and we have seen this mechanic done countless times. Like Benedictus is one of the more prominent ones I can think of recently, or right now in standard you got Hamul with Imbue giving you that different hero power. But again, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not what I'm talking about at all. There was also in this expansion a huge look at lifesteal, or push for lifesteal. Lifesteal was not introduced with the Witchwood. I believe it was, the keyword was solidified, I think, in Frozen Throne, but lifesteal was really pushed with this set. It really came into fruition, and that is a very big deal, where lifesteal and healing in Hearthstone in particular was super rare. That a card like Antique Healbot was a very good meta card. 5 mana 3/3, gain 8 health, or restore 8 health, was nuts basically back at GVG for quite some time. And well, cards like Vicious Scalehide, when buffed, could give you a big health swing, and that definitely fundamentally changed the game. Survivability in Hearthstone went up, but again, we're not talking about lifesteal. We're talking about the other half of this card, Rush. Rush was introduced in this expansion, and Rush fundamentally has changed the game of Hearthstone in every facet since its introduction. It wasn't super powerful when it launched. A lot of these cards didn't see a ton of play. Houndmaster Shaw, I don't have this golden, let's fix that. This card's goated. Houndmaster Shaw was one of the cards that was pretty darn good, where your other minions have Rush, and basically the sticks on the board, you just basically dictate the game for the rest of the time. I remember Cube Shaw and just do some really crazy stuff. Shaw was one of those cards that really stood out, that saw a good chunk of play. The majority of these Rush minions, though, are pretty darn awful, with only like Militia Commander, if I recall correctly, from back in the day seeing prominent play, especially like Control Warrior with Warpath. And by the way, Echo was another keyword from this expansion with, you know, Warpath, like I mentioned, that also created a ton of issues where they had to change the rules where Echo couldn't go less than 1 with Snip Snap. So there's a whole, you could write like a whole freaking thesis on this damn expansion with all the things it introduced. But with Rush allowed you to finally be able to interact with the board in a more meaningful way, other than just having like a removal spell or something like Hex, right? Or an AoE like Flame Strike, or, you know, just a charge minion like Korkrot Elite, or a fake Rush minion in Ice Howl, right? That's like the first OG kind of Rush minion. It's a pretty funny one, taking a look at it in retrospect. But yes, Rush, can you think of all? I mean, we could just look in our collections and take a look at how many Rush cards have been made since. How many rewards, how many Colossals, Titans, all sorts of different things giving you the ability to rush. And how many times is it when a card doesn't have Rush and we're thinking, man, that card kind of sucks. Maybe you could give it a Rush or something, right? That didn't used to be a thing until the Witchwood. There was no such thing. And I wonder if it was like taken almost from like Shadowverse. Shadowverse, I think, had like this evolve mechanic where you play something and you click it, you can like attack with it right away or something. I'm not super familiar with the game. I haven't played with it in a while, but that mechanic has just changed the game so much, where board battling is so different than it used to be. And when we go into like the old Brawl and we think of like, can we go back to a day of the OG Hearthstone, of classic Hearthstone? It's just not possible anymore, right? One of the things of like these older decks, like Firebat's Face Hunter, is you can just play these minions and go face, and it's really hard to try and remove them one by one without like some kind of AoE. You can't value trade with the Rush minion. It's way more likely for it to stick. Plus the lifesteal aspect, healing, like I said, wasn't around much. Armor gain was minimal to Warrior, and even Warrior, like Patron Warrior, that had its own type of Rush, right? With Warsong Commander, at least back in the day, but that was more of charge. To get to these old style of decks, you almost have to eliminate the defensive options that we're so used to in the modern game of Hearthstone. That, yeah, the Witchwood has had such a large impact on the game that it's really hard to quantify how much Rush has mattered in the game, how much lifesteal in particular as well, with that push in that set, has influenced the game. All you have to do is look at my favorite class, Death Knight, these days, and see the impact of it with the Dreadhound Handler, with having Rush, stealing all that stuff, health gain from leeches, Elise the Navigator giving you hounds with Rush, an insane armor gain, or Pterodax with the Rush and the lifesteal. This is all remnant still of the Witchwood. All these years later, how much it has kind of dictated, pushed things, shaped the game of Hearthstone into something that is just different. It's fundamentally different, and it's never been the same since that set. And sure, there's plenty of other mechanics that have changed the game over time, but I don't know if there has been one that has had as much of an impact. And Rush, the only one I could think of that you can argue, and it certainly has merit, and I think we've talked about it before, is the League of Explorers and Discover, with cards like Finley and like the Jeweled Scarab. Yes, Discover, probably the other big one, Elephant in the Room. We also got Highlander decks from that set. So it's basically between, to me, the Witchwood and League of Explorers. But yeah, it's really kind of fascinating to look at, you know, the options we had were so much fewer to fight for board, that we have so many more now, and that also sometimes leads to the board almost not mattering when you can answer it too efficiently. So I just thought, let's ramble about the Witchwood, a set we just don't really talk about that much in terms of like the grand scheme of the really, you know, impactful expansions in Hearthstone history. Anyways, if you enjoyed that rambling retrospective, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.